The Louisville Cardinals lost to the Air Force Falcons 31-28 in the SERVPRO First Responder Bowl on Tuesday afternoon. We'll talk about everything you need to know about that loss and more on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I want to take this time to say thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned yesterday at the very end of the show, in the conclusion that Jeremy Wallman would be on the set today, that has actually been postponed till later on in the week. I want to save the the year-end review episode for the final episode of the week and the final episode of the calendar year. So we're talking about the recap of the bowl loss, 31-28 in the First Responder Bowl to the Air Force Falcons. The Louisville Cardinals in defeat. We'll start out talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly in that matchup, and then transitioning into the initial takeaways and reactions. And then finally, we'll answer the question, what does this mean, or how does this affect the outlook going into next season, and what does this loss represent heading into next season? Before we get to the content of today's show, like I mentioned, for those who are not aware of who I am, my name is Dalton Pence. I'm a credentialed media member for Cardinal Sports Zone, where I serve as both a football beat writer and a recruiting analyst. You can follow my personal Twitter in the handle in the graphic in the bottom left hand of your screen, and the podcast Twitter page is at @LO_Louisville. So let's get right on into it. As I mentioned, it was a tough loss for the Cardinals, very close in the SERVPRO First Responder Bowl on Tuesday afternoon. The Cards lost 31-28. As we've done with a handful, or I should say the majority of the football games this season, we have done the good, the bad, the ugly segment. We'll do that for the final time in the 2021 calendar year and until next fall. So the good, it's really hard to kind of depict the good in this situation, but the good for me is some notable players standing out in this contest, and I think that bodes well for next season for those players. And the bad is ultimately some mishaps along the way, not handling the little things well. And then the ugly, obviously, was the passing defense for the Louisville Cardinals. Let's dive right on into the good section of it. There were a handful of players that I mentioned, throughout the week to some friends that I wanted to see get some more targets, some more touches, depending on their position. I know on this show I had Huggins-Bruce and Marshawn Ford as the players that I thought were going to have breakout games and the players to watch. Marshawn Ford had 2 catches for 20 yards. I think he only had 2 or 3 targets. Huggins-Bruce was second on the team, 3 catches for 46 yards. It wasn't necessarily a lot going for the Cards through the air. Malik Cunningham only had 207 yards through the air. The Cards, however, on the ground, 37 carries, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns, led by true freshman Travion Cooley, 18 carries, 92 yards, and a touchdown. It was great to see him do good with Jalen Mitchell out for the game, and we wish him, and all those that weren't able to make it, we wish them the best, and hopefully they're able to get stronger past this and stuff like that, depending on what they've been through and why they had to miss the game. But ultimately, Travion Cooley played really well. Jawar Jordan, the Syracuse transfer, had the 100-yard kickoff return for the touchdown after Air Force went up 21-7. So that was a big answer for the Cardinals. And then, Tyler Harrell, every time I feel like his number is called, he does great things. He led the Cards in receiving 4 for 80 and a touchdown. He had a touchdown in that second half. That was pretty solid. So ultimately, I think that it was a pretty good turnout for a lot of players that I was looking out for. Unfortunately, that just didn't end up being enough. And into the bad part of the segment, I feel like one of the recurring themes for this team this season has been not handling the little things all that well. Costly penalties, costly turnovers, stalling drives in the red zone. Not it's just small things. Allowing Air Force to convert on 3rd and long for a passing offense that hasn't necessarily been good this season. There was a couple instances of the Cards not handling the little things well. A couple that come to mind. Number one, that fourth and goal from the 2 when they ran Travion Cooley and he ended up being a no gain. I felt like the red zone offense has been a problem for the Cards all season long, statistically, and I felt like this was just kind of one more instance in that trend. There was the 3rd and 14 in that in the drive that allowed Air Force to go up by 10. And, that could have put the Cards, in position with the ball down 4 to go and win the game. Unfortunately, that ended up not being the case. Air Force converted on 2 third downs, longer than 6 yards on that long drive. There was the instance where Yasir Abdullah had a big hit on 1st down and stopped the opposing ball carrier deep in the backfield. I'm talking like 4 or 5 yards back. It set up 2nd and 15. But it was a dead ball after the play, face mask penalty on Louisville. And I think that's the first time that I've ever seen that happen, but it just goes to show you, it's the small things that add up. And, one play or one instance or one penalty might not lose you a ball game, but it definitely can boil over. It can excuse me, it can accumulate, and you get a slew of instances like that. And then at the end of the day, you're looking and down by 3 points when the clock finally hits 0. So you can kind of go back and pinpoint certain instances. Is this truly a game? And if Travion Cooley or the Louisville offense is able to get in 4th and or 3rd and goal from wherever they're at. So the bad is, obviously not handling the little things well. And the ugly, obviously, is the passing defense. And that kind of completely blew me away. Huggins-Daniels led the game in passing yards. He was 9 for 10, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging 25.2 yards per completion. Brandon Lewis had 5 for 172 and 2 touchdowns, had the 64-yard touchdown in which he was completely wide open. I feel like the passing defense for the Cardinals has been something that they've struggled with, consistently. When they, go up against a solid passing quarterback, whether that be Brendan Armstrong, Sam Hartman, Devin Leary, the list goes on of all the the solid quarterbacks that they played in the ACC. Well, now you come into a matchup, quarterback that doesn't have over 1,000 yards total coming into the game, and he basically eclipses a fourth of his total yards in one game. That's not necessarily something that could happen. I feel like the Cardinals did pretty decent on the ground, containing Air Force. I mean, Air Force averaged 3.1 yards per attempt. They're the number 1 rushing offense in the country, 340 yards on average. They had nearly half of that, 170 on the ground today against the Cardinals. So we've seen to where Louisville's kind of kept these high-profile rushing offenses intact, but giving up those big plays through the air. And it looked like Huggins-Daniels, not necessarily a good quarterback, but at the end of the day, he made the Cardinals pay, and we'll talk about that more in the final segment. But the ugly has to be the passing defense. We're gonna, use this time to transition into the initial takeaways in reaction, and I think the initial takeaway for me is that the Cards just weren't good enough on both ends of the field, and I think that's as simple as it comes down to. I'll explain that rationale here in just a second after we talk about our friends at Built Bar. It's almost the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good. You'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars, which can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but it just gets so boring. By like week 3, you might be thinking, this is just not worth it. Where's the chocolate? Well, Built Bar has you covered there. It's covered in 100% real chocolate. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has about 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So do yourself a favor. Go to Built.com with the wide variety of flavors and use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Once again, that's use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Ultimate College Football Playoff Preview 2021, local experts' betting advice and draft analysis. The most comprehensive college football playoff preview is live ahead of Friday's semifinal action. So, diving right on in to the initial takeaways and reactions, and like I said, my main takeaway from this is that the Cards just weren't good enough on either end of the field, and that they struggled all season long to put together a truly complete game. Because as bad as the defense was in the first half, giving up 28 points, Cards only gave up 3 points in the second half. That came at the field goal in the fourth quarter. The Cards outscored the Falcons 14-3 in the second half, but it proved to be too much of a deficit for Louisville to overcome. Offensively, the takeaways are, the passing offense really wasn't able to get anything going. I know people will harp on the play calling and everything like that, and I think that there's some merit to it. I was wondering why at times Louisville wasn't utilizing the the athletes that they have on the outside with Tyler Harrell and Amari Huggins-Bruce, etc. Malik Cunningham kind of struggled to start the game. Started out, I think he was 1 for 6. He ended up finishing 13 for 21, 207 yards and a touchdown. But I think that Satterfield and company did a good job of getting the Cards going on the ground. Like I mentioned, 5.2 yards per attempt, 37 rushes, 192 yards, and 2 touchdowns, led by true freshman Travion Cooley. Offensively, I mean, like I said, it's handling the little things. You have 4th and goal from the 2-yard line, and it doesn't work out, and it is what it is. It's a risk that you obviously will probably take more often than not. But at the end of the day, the Cards weren't able to score. Good thing is the defense did go make the Falcons go 3-and-out. They got the ball back on the 49 and then scored shortly after that. So offensively, they put up 28 points. They lost. Malik Cunningham, I felt like didn't have his sharpest day as a pocket passer. It'll be interesting to see how Scott Satterfield and company approach Malik Cunningham and how they're planning to use him in more of a variety of ways in the 2022 campaign. So offensively, it is not really where most of my gripes are. I felt like I was pleased with the rushing attack. I would have liked to have seen the ball thrown a little more, especially deep, because I thought that Tyler Harrell, on his touchdown, he just basically beat the guy down the field and beat him on a route straight to the end zone. So definitely love to see what he's been able to do when his number's been called. I still wish there were more targets for Marshawn Ford. I feel like great things happen when you do get him the football. And but credit this Air Force defense. The Air Force defense came into the game, like I mentioned, top 20 in pretty much every single statistical category. The Cards were able to rush against the nation's 7th ranked rushing defense that gives up just under 95 yards per game. But it was the Cardinal defense is where I kind of started scratching my head. And, as much as, we need to focus on improvements, let me, go out and start by saying this. This is a defense that has been decimated by injury and transfer, losing Monty Montgomery at the beginning of the season, basically, and then you have Catrell Clark, your starting cornerback, out. Greedy Vance, arguably your third best cornerback. He entered the transfer portal. He wasn't playing for the Cardinals this game. I believe Trey Franklin may have gotten hurt in this one. Can't confirm, but I know we saw a lot of Rance Connor. So, Trey Franklin's limited availability. Kendrick Duncan Jr. Had surgery. He was out for the matchup, and you're missing a couple of starters, and you have some depth issues still. So you have to take that into consideration. But ultimately, I thought the team did very good at defending the run. There were some instances where I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, we could have done a better job of guarding that. But 55 carries for the Falcons, only 170 yards, like I mentioned, 3.1 yards per carry. That is pretty impressive from the Louisville defense. But unfortunately, the passing aspect of the defense was where the team struggled. Air Force came into the game, not really having to pass the past 2 weeks. Daniels completed one pass in the second to last week of the regular season, and in the last week Daniels didn't play and they didn't even attempt to pass. So Air Force came in, they nine completions, 9 completions of 10, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns. A lot of these receivers wide open on that 64-yard touchdown for Brandon Lewis. He had 2 on the day. Let's face it. I mean, there's not many ways that you can positively spin this because Hazy Daniels came into the matchup completing less than 46% of his total passes and having less than 1,000 passing yards on the season. He had over a fourth of that in just one game against the Cardinals. That's something that it's tough to swallow. Injuries or not, this is an offense that has not thrown the ball well all year long. And it poses a lot of concern for next year. It makes you question, okay, what are we going to change schematically to make sure that this defense that is adding talent, adding depth, is able to be put in the best possible position in the 2022 campaign, so we're not having this same conversation down the road. But ultimately, I think that it was one of those games to where Louisville didn't necessarily execute the greatest on offense, and defensively, one side of the ball was good. Passing wise, not so much. And for the most part, I feel like the name of the game for Louisville has been the lack of a complete game, and this was just more of a trend of contest to where they played solid for a certain amount of the game. Other amounts, is the reason why you ended up losing. So we'll talk about what this means for the team heading into the offseason and into the 2022 campaign. We'll talk about that here in just a second after we talk about our friends at BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the college bowl season and toward the pro football playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports, and BetOnline is where the game starts. So, looking into a little bit of a general sense and looking past the result of this game and kind of taking what we've taken from this game and applying it to where the Cards are going to be in the offseason, what is the focus and stuff like that. How does this alter your offseason plans? And I think that, it's a little misleading using, that phrase, how does it alter? Because in all honesty, I don't think it really changes anything. If anything, it reaffirms what you already knew needed to change or needed to improve. Number one, offensively, not a lot of gripes come offensively. I think that, a diverse play calling and a variety of, different types of runs and getting Malik Cunningham in the best situations to, allow him to succeed as a pocket passer as well as a scrambler. That would be my main number one thing to focus on for the offseason offensively. But the the moral of the story here, or not really the moral, but the takeaway from all this and what we're kind of coming back to is the fact that this offense should be right back in the hunt of things. I mean, you have the majority of your offensive line coming back. You have some very good skill receivers coming back and coming in, and then you are going to have one of the best running back cores in the ACC with Tyon Evans, Travion Cooley, assuming that he stays, Jalen Mitchell, and Joar Jordan, etc. There's a lot of guys to focus on there. So offensively, like I mentioned, it's all about the play calling aspect, getting guys, to where you're taking away the predictability of what you're doing on offense. And I think that we saw strides in that this year, but it's going to have to continue to take steps to allow the Louisville offense to, witness and achieve maximum success. But the defense is where things need to change, need to alter. Scott Satterfield said in the post-game press conference, I believe it was, oh my gosh, I forget who tweeted it. It might have been Eric Crawford. It could have been maybe Mark Ennis. It was someone in the Louisville Twitter sphere tweeted, from the conference that Scott Satterfield alluded to there being coaching changes, multiple. I'm going to see if I can find that real quick. I'm sorry I didn't have that prepared, but ultimately I think that I think that everyone realizes that things need to be done. Coaching staff wise, there needs to be a little bit of change. Here, Eric Crawford posted the full exchange. The question was, how much of a priority is the staff change? And the rest of it is not able to be made out. Scott Satterfield says, and I quote, "Yeah, well, so we got that. We'll be addressing that over the next few weeks before we get back in January. Several different positions that we'll hire, in all aspects, really. And so we'll tackle that in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then, we'll see what happens over this period. You never know, player-wise or coach-wise in this particular time of the year. This is the time where things happen in the coaching world. We've seen it. We continue to see it every day, but we'll make adjustments and we'll roll with it. And like I said, whoever is coming back here in January, let's be ready to get this program rolling. That's the message." So, reading between the lines, there are going to be some changes to the Louisville coaching staff. We'll continue to have that coverage for you here. But defensively is where things need to see the biggest change. I think that we're doing a good job of adding depth to the program. I think with the one-time transfer rule, they got Mohamed Sanogo, MJ Griffin. You're contributing to the linebacker and the safety room. I still think they need. If this shows anything, it's that you have to continue to bolster the secondary. The numbers of depth in the cornerback room are very slim right now. I would expect the team to add 1 to 2 guys in the cornerback room. Hopefully, Kittrell Clark is back. Excuse me, etc. And this contest reaffirms what we've seen all year, and that something needs to be tweaked schematically. The passing defense, it seems like guys playing a little further off receivers, in third and fourth and short situations, which are kind of head scratchers. But I'm willing to give Scott Satterfield, and company this offseason to go through those improvements and make sure you tweak them up, because 2022 is going to be the prove-it year. I thought that 2021 was going to be, but this team in 6-7, they improved by 2 wins from last year. We saw, this is a couple plays from being 9-3 or 10-3. So it does suck that the fact that kind of the worst case scenario came to be in those close games. But at the end of the day, we will continue to focus on how Louisville is going to approach the offseason with the additions. There will probably be more departures. We'll talk about the coaching carousel when that time comes. But ultimately, what this matchup taught us and what this contest means for how the offseason is going to be approached. It doesn't change anything, but it reaffirms what we already knew, in that there's going to be some things that need to be tweaked on both sides of the ball. Some personnel issues need to be addressed in terms of adding more depth and more quality at certain positions, and we will continue to monitor that. January, I would assume, is going to be a very busy month for the Cardinal football program. So talked about this matchup in whole, or as a whole, I should say, the good, the bad, the ugly, the initial takeaways and reaction, and the overall effect this game had on, or will have on how the team and program addresses the offseason and progresses in that realm. So tomorrow, it's going to be some basketball talk. The basketball team returns to action after a COVID-related pause against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. It's going to be a very solid matchup, to finish out the calendar year in 2021. We'll talk about that game and recap and stuff like that, all that and more on this episode of the Locked On Louisville or on the next episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Before we get out of here, a couple quick shout-outs. The first of the Cardinal Sports Zone podcast. That next episode will be released on Sunday or Monday. Took a break for the holidays. You can get that on cardinalsportszone.com. And then the Locked On Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q, with handicapping expert from Lee Sterling. You can follow that on the Odyssey app or wherever you like to get your podcast. But that's going to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.